did from the coronation, but nobody, let alone Kate, curtsied.
Camilla had done everything right. The planning was thorough and protocol well observed. Her position as queen made the decision hers to make, and everyone involved understood that. What nobody anticipated was Catherine, specifically the version of Catherine that has emerged in the past 2 years. It was quieter than before and more certain, less interested in managing perceptions and more focused on outcomes. That version of Catherine walked into that ceremony, assessed what had been arranged, and changed it, calmly, completely, without asking anyone's permission. The ceremony that changed everything. Royal ceremonies are not spontaneous events. Every detail is mapped out weeks in advance, sometimes months. Things like the order of proceedings, positioning of family members are well mapped out. Nothing is left to chance because nothing can be left to chance. These occasions carry institutional weight that extends far beyond the day itself. They are recorded, studied, and referenced for decades, which is precisely why what Catherine did landed so hard. The ceremony in question was not a minor engagement. This was one of those occasions that the monarchy uses to signal something to the country and to the watching world. The kind of event where presence alone is a statement. Where the arrangement of bodies in a room communicates more than any speech or press release ever could. Camilla had been involved in the planning from the beginning. Her household worked closely with the ceremonial team, and her preferences were incorporated into the running order. The specific elements she had overseen related directly to how the occasion would open, how the senior royals would be positioned and presented as the proceedings began. It was a detail that most viewers watching from home would barely register. But inside that room, it meant everything. Positioning at a royal ceremony is not decoration, it is language. It communicates who holds authority, who defers to whom, whose role is central, and whose is peripheral. Camilla's arrangement placed her squarely at the focal point of the opening sequence. Not aggressively or in a way that would generate obvious headlines, but deliberately, in a way that reinforced her status as queen and ensured the visual narrative of the day began with her at its center. It was a smart move, quietly executed, entirely within her rights. Catherine arrived at the venue with William. They moved through the pre-ceremony formalities, the way they always do, composed and measured, exchanging the expected words with the expected people. Nothing in her manner suggested anything unusual was about to happen. Then she spoke to the lead ceremonial aide. The conversation was brief. Those close enough to observe it later described it as unhurried. Catherine did not appear agitated or urgent. She did not pull the aide aside with any visible tension. She simply spoke to him in the tone of someone communicating a practical adjustment, calm, clear, completely certain of what she was asking. The aide listened, nodded, and moved to implement the change. What followed took several minutes to fully execute, as the ceremonial team quietly reorganized the opening sequence. Camilla, who was in a separate holding area with Charles at this point, was not informed of the adjustment before it happened. She became aware of it when the proceedings began, and the arrangement she had overseen was visibly different from what she had approved. The expression on her face in that moment was noted by more than one person present, not fury. Camilla is far too experienced and far too controlled to allow fury to surface publicly, but something shifted behind her eyes, a recalibration, a rapid private assessment of what had just happened and what it meant. Those who have watched her closely for years recognized it immediately. She had been outmaneuvered. The ceremony itself proceeded without incident. To the vast majority of people watching, nothing unusual had occurred. The occasion unfolded with the dignity and precision these events are designed to project. The cameras captured what the cameras were positioned to capture. The official record of the day reflected nothing out of the ordinary, but the people in that room carried something different out with them. An awareness that something had changed. Not dramatically, or in a way that would generate an immediate story or require a palace response, but changed in the way that genuinely significant shifts inside institutions always change, quietly, beneath the surface, in a manner that only becomes fully visible when enough time has passed to understand what it was the beginning of. Catherine had made a decision, not a reckless one or an emotional one, a considered, precisely timed decision that used the ceremony itself as the moment to make something visible that had previously only existed in private. It was a repositioning, a signal. delivered in the only language the royal family truly understands: action without announcement. The aide who implemented the change was a senior figure, not someone who takes instruction from just anyone. The fact that he moved immediately and without hesitation said something important. It said that Catherine's authority at that moment was not in question, not even to the people whose job it was to manage these occasions. That detail did not escape Camilla's notice. Neither did the composure with which Catherine carried the rest of the ceremony. There was no visible satisfaction, and no glance in Camilla's direction that could be read as pointed. Just the same measured and unhurried presence she brought to every public occasion, as though what she had done was entirely unremarkable. That composure was its own statement. Because it communicated something more unsettling to Camilla than any confrontation could have. It said that this had not been difficult for Catherine. The decision had been made long before she walked into that room. And the ceremony was simply the moment chosen to make it visible. Something had been building toward this for a long time. The question is, how far back that history runs? Was something Camilla had not registered until it was too late to do anything about it. The groundwork had been laid. The ceremonial aide was briefed, and what it reveals about the relationship between these two women beneath the carefully maintained surface of royal unity. The history between these two women. Nobody warned Catherine about Camilla, not directly or in any formal sense. There was no conversation over tea where someone told her secrets. No one ever said, "Here is what you need to understand about the woman your future husband's father married," nor was she told, "Here is how she operates." Catherine had to learn that herself, and the learning process was not gentle. When Catherine first entered royal life officially, the dynamic inside the family was already complex, in ways that took years to fully map. Charles and Camilla had married in April 2005. The relationship had survived decades of public hostility. They had survived scandal, divorce, and years of negative press that followed Camilla wherever she went. By the time Catherine arrived on the scene, Camilla had already fought one of the most grueling public battles any woman in that family had ever faced, and won. That victory shaped everything about how Camilla carried herself inside the institution. There was a particular quality to her confidence, not arrogance, something more specific than that. The settled certainty of a woman who had been underestimated and written off. A woman who had been publicly despised and had outlasted every single person who had predicted her downfall. That is not a small thing to walk into a room with. Catherine was in her late 20s when the scrutiny began in earnest. Young, composed on the surface, still learning the architecture of a world that operates by rules nobody writes down. Rules nobody explains directly. The expectation was that she would observe, absorb, and defer, particularly to the women who had been inside the institution longer, especially Camilla. In those early years, the relationship appeared functional, warm even. In the carefully managed way, royal relationships tend to appear warm in public. There were joint engagements, shared appearances, moments photographed and distributed to press outlets that projected a family comfortable in each other's company. But comfort and alliance are different things entirely. The fault lines were there from the beginning. They were simply buried beneath the performance of unity that the institution requires from its members at all times. Camilla had spent years establishing herself as the authority on how things were done, how occasions were managed, and the internal hierarchy expressed itself in the 100 small decisions that shape a royal household's daily operation. Catherine observed all of it. She did not push back in those early years. That restraint was sometimes misread as deference, as an acknowledgement that Camilla's seniority placed her beyond challenge. People inside and outside the family made the mistake of interpreting Catherine's patience as passivity. It was not passivity. It was the behavior of someone who understood that the right moment to act had not yet arrived. Someone mapping the terrain carefully before committing to a direction. There is a particular kind of intelligence in that. The ability to absorb, wait, and resist the impulse to establish dominance before the conditions are right. Catherine possessed that intelligence from the start. The specific fault lines between the two women developed gradually and fell into roughly 3 categories. The first was ceremonial authority. It was about who had the right to shape how occasions were managed, whose preferences took precedence when those preferences conflicted. Camilla's position as queen consort, and then queen gave her a formal basis for asserting control over these decisions. But Catherine's position as Princess of Wales and future queen placed her in a lane that was always going to intersect with Camilla's. Those intersections were rarely smooth. The second fault line was influence over Charles. This one was subtler and rarely acknowledged openly. Charles occupies an impossible position between his wife and his son's family. Every decision he makes that affects one side of that equation affects the other. Camilla understood long before Catherine arrived how to direct Charles's moods. She knew his priorities and particular sensitivities. That knowledge gave her an advantage inside the family's internal politics that was difficult to counter directly. Catherine found other ways to counter it. She started building her own relationship with Charles independently, demonstrating loyalty to the institution in ways that resonated with him personally, making herself indispensable to the public-facing work of the monarchy. And she did it in a manner that made her value undeniable, regardless of where the internal politics stood on any given day. The third fault line was Diana. This one ran deeper than either of the others and was almost never discussed directly. Camilla's entire history with this family is inseparable from Diana's story. The relationship between Charles and Camilla during the marriage, the public's enduring identification of Camilla as the person whose presence contributed to Diana's unhappiness. That history never fully disappeared. It simply went underground. Catherine's connection to Diana's memory complicated things further. Not because Catherine weaponized it. It was the opposite. Catherine's careful and genuine honoring of Diana's legacy carried its own authority, precisely because it was never performed aggressively. It did not need to be. The public's response to Catherine's connection with Diana spoke for itself. And inside the palace, that response was tracked and understood by everyone, including Camilla. There were specific moments over the years that people close to both women point to as indicators of where the relationship was actually heading beneath its composed surface. Occasions where a decision went one way publicly and another way privately, where the official account of an event and the account given by those present did not quite match. Those moments accumulated. Each one individually was manageable, explainable, easy enough to smooth over with the right words from the right communications team. But collectively, they told a story about two women occupying the same institution with fundamentally different ideas about who held authority within it and on what basis that authority rested. Camilla's claim rested on her position, on her title, and on the formal hierarchy that placed the Queen above the Princess of Wales in the order of precedence. Catherine's claim rested on something harder to define and considerably harder to argue against: the future. Every person inside that institution understood, at some level, that the current arrangement was temporary. They knew that Charles's reign, however long it lasted, was a transitional chapter, and the story the monarchy was building toward had William and Catherine at its center. Camilla's authority, real and formal as it was, existed within a time frame. Catherine's did not. That asymmetry shaped everything. It sat beneath every joint appearance, shared engagement, and carefully photographed moment of royal unity. Camilla knew it, Catherine knew it, and both women conducted themselves accordingly. The ceremony was simply the moment when that knowledge stopped being private. What Camilla had planned for that occasion was not accidental. Understanding exactly what she wanted and why she wanted meant knowing where Camilla's priorities had been sitting in the months leading up to the event. And those priorities reveal more about this story than anything that happened on the day itself. What Camilla wanted and why it mattered. Camilla had been watching the calendar for months, not impatiently. That is not her style, but with the focused attention of someone who understood exactly what this ceremony represented. Someone who knew exactly what needed to happen within it to serve her interests. The occasion had been circled internally long before the public announcement. Long before the guest lists were finalized and the ceremonial teams began their detailed planning work. This was not just another royal engagement. The ceremony carried a specific historical weight that made it different from the routine occasions that fill a royal calendar. It was the kind of event that gets referenced in future documentaries. The kind that generates photographs reproduced for years afterward. The kind where positioning, precedence, and the visual language of hierarchy communicate something to the public. Something that lingers long after the day itself is forgotten. Camilla understood all of that. What she wanted from the occasion was straightforward in theory and enormously significant in practice. The opening sequence of the ceremony, and the part Catherine would later quietly redirect, had been designed. Carefully designed to place Camilla at the visual and symbolic center of the proceedings. Not Charles, William, or Catherine. The reasoning was defensible on formal grounds. As queen, Camilla held the senior position among the women present. The order of precedence supported her arrangement. The ceremonial team had signed off on it, and the household advisors had reviewed it. Every box that needed to be checked had been checked. From a purely procedural standpoint, what Camilla had planned was entirely correct. But procedure and purpose are different things. The purpose behind the arrangement went beyond protocol. Camilla had spent the better part of 2 decades fighting for legitimacy. Legitimacy inside an institution that had initially resisted her presence at every level. The public hostility had been real and sustained. The internal resistance had been equally real, if less visible. Every formal occasion she attended in the early years of her relationship with Charles carried the weight of that resistance. Those days were supposed to be over. The coronation had changed things significantly. Standing beside Charles as he was crowned, wearing her own crown, being formally recognized by the institution and the country as queen. That moment represented the culmination of everything Camilla had fought through to reach her position. But culminations have a way of requiring reinforcement. Because the public acceptance of Camilla as queen has always been conditional, it was done in a way that the acceptance of previous queens was not. The polling numbers tell a complicated story. Respect for her resilience and her conduct in the role exists alongside a persistent undercurrent of feeling. Camilla knows those numbers. Everyone inside the palace knows those numbers. They are tracked and discussed and factored into decisions about how occasions are managed and how the queen is positioned within them. Every ceremony and significant public moment is an opportunity to reinforce the legitimacy that was formally conferred at the coronation, but has never felt entirely settled in the public imagination. That is what made this particular ceremony so valuable to her. The historical significance of the occasion meant the images generated would be seen and shared and referenced widely. Being positioned at the center of the opening sequence was not vanity, it was a strategy, careful, considered, entirely rational strategy aimed at consolidating a public perception that Camilla has worked for years to build. The specific element Catherine overruled was related to the processional order. Camilla had arranged for the Queen's entrance to proceed and effectively framed the arrival of the wider family group. The visual effect would have placed her at the beginning of the ceremony's narrative. It would have established her presence as the anchor around which everything else arranged itself. It was the kind of thing that reads as natural and traditional to a casual viewer, yet communicating something very precise to anyone who understands how these occasions work. Catherine understood exactly how these occasions work. What makes the overrule particularly striking is the level of preparation that must have preceded it. Catherine did not walk into that ceremony and make an impulsive decision. The change she requested of the ceremonial aid was specific, detailed, implemented smoothly enough to suggest that the people responsible for executing it had at least some prior awareness that an adjustment might be requested. That prior awareness did not come from Camilla's household. The implication is significant. Catherine had done her own groundwork, had conversations the official planning process did not include. She had ensured that when the moment came, the infrastructure to support her decision was already quietly in place. Camilla did not see it coming. That blind spot reveals something important. For all her experience and understanding of how this institution operates, Camilla had not fully updated her assessment of Catherine. The version of Catherine she was operating against was the earlier one. The composed, patient, deferential figure who spent years observing without acting. That version was gone. The Catherine who walked into that ceremony had been through something. She went through the cancer diagnosis and months of treatment, the careful, controlled return to public life. That experience does not leave a person unchanged. It strips away the things that felt important before and clarifies with brutal efficiency what actually matters and what does not. What no longer mattered to Catherine was managing Camilla's comfort. That shift in priority was something Camilla had not registered until it was too late to do anything about it. The groundwork had been laid. The ceremonial aid was briefed. The adjustment was ready to be made. All that remained was the moment itself, and Catherine chose it with the precision of someone who had been considering it for a very long time. The question that follows is not simply what Catherine did, it is how she did it, the mechanics of the move, the timing, and the people involved, the role William played or deliberately did not play. Because the how reveals something about Catherine that goes beyond this single ceremony. It reveals exactly the kind of queen she intends to be. How Catherine made her move. timing is everything in this family. Not in the casual sense people mean when they use that phrase, in a deeply specific, institutionally understood sense. The royal family operates within a framework where the when of a decision carries as much weight as the what. Acting too early signals impatience. Acting too late signals weakness. The window between those two failure points is narrow. Identifying it correctly requires a particular kind of judgment that cannot be taught. It has to be developed. Catherine has been developing it for over 2 decades. From the years of patient waiting before the engagement, through the early period of royal life, where every public appearance was assessed and every misstep was amplified. Something had been building toward this for a long time. Through the turbulence of recent years, the illness, and the recovery. All of that accumulated into something, a very precise sense of when. The preparation for what happened at the ceremony began weeks before the occasion itself, not in any way that would have been visible to Camilla's household or to the broader ceremonial planning team. Catherine moved through the preparatory process the way she always moves through official preparations, thoroughly, quietly, asking the right questions of the right people, without those questions forming a pattern that anyone outside her closest circle would notice. The first conversation happened with William. This is important to establish clearly because the nature of William's involvement shaped everything that followed. William did not initiate the decision. This was not a joint operation planned over a kitchen table in Adelaide Cottage. The decision was Catherine's. The thinking behind it was Catherine's. The assessment of the moment and what it required was entirely her own. But she told William not to seek permission. That framing would fundamentally misread the dynamic between them at this stage of their lives and their marriage. She told him, because there are no significant moves made inside this partnership without the other person being aware. That is not constraint. It is the architecture of a functioning royal marriage built on genuine trust rather than managed appearances. William's response is telling. He did not object. He did not counsel caution or suggest a different approach, nor did he raise concerns about the potential fallout. According to those with knowledge of the conversation, his response was notably brief. He listened. He understood what she was describing and why. And he said something to the effect that she should do what she felt was right. That response carries more weight than it might appear to on the surface. William knows Camilla, has known her for most of his life. The relationship between them has its own complicated history that runs parallel to the larger story of Charles and Camilla's place in the family. William's decision not to intervene or protect Camilla from what was coming was itself a choice, a quiet but unambiguous one. Catherine noted it and moved forward. The second set of conversations involved people inside the ceremonial structure, not the senior planning team connected to Camilla's household, specifically the operational layer beneath that. The people responsible for executing decisions on the day rather than making them in advance. This is where Catherine's understanding of how the institution actually functions gave her a significant advantage. Royal ceremonies are planned at the top, but executed at the bottom. The senior advisors and household officials agree with the outline. The detailed implementation falls to a layer of professional ceremonial staff, someone whose loyalty is to the occasion itself rather than to any individual household. Approaching that layer directly, bypassing the planning hierarchy, is not technically irregular, but it is unusual enough to signal intent to anyone paying close attention. Camilla's household was not paying close enough attention. The lead ceremonial aide Catherine spoke to on the day was not acting without context when he implemented the change. The conversation at the venue was not the first time these two had discussed the matter. A prior exchange, brief and carefully worded, had taken place days earlier, enough to ensure that when Catherine made her request on the morning of the ceremony, the response was immediate and unquestioning. There was no hesitation or request for clarification. No suggestion that the change needed to be approved by anyone else. That seamlessness was not accidental. It was the result of Catherine having done the work to ensure the infrastructure supported her decision, way before the decision was publicly made. This is the detail that separates what she did from a spontaneous act of defiance. Spontaneous acts can be explained away, managed, reframed by a communications team skilled enough to control the narrative. What Catherine executed was considerably harder to reframe, because it was not reactive. It was not emotional. It was a planned, methodical, precisely implemented decision that used the formal structure of the ceremony as its vehicle. The message it sent to everyone who understood what had happened was not simply that Catherine had overruled Camilla on this occasion. The message was that Catherine had the capability and the willingness to do so whenever the situation required it. That is a fundamentally different kind of statement. The reaction inside the venue, in the immediate aftermath of the change, was carefully observed by several people present. Camilla's senior aide, positioned near the back of the room, registered what had happened within minutes. A brief exchange with another member of the Queen's household followed, controlled, professional, but carrying the particular energy of people absorbing unexpected information and calculating its implications in real time. Camilla herself maintained absolute composure throughout the ceremony. This should not be underestimated as an achievement. Whatever was moving beneath the surface, the public face remained exactly what it needed to be: dignified, present, entirely consistent with the conduct expected of a queen at a formal occasion. The cameras recorded nothing that would generate a headline about tension or conflict. But the cameras were not inside Camilla's head, and they were not present for the conversation that took place between Camilla and her most senior aide in the car leaving the venue. That conversation, described by someone with indirect knowledge of its content, was not brief. It covered what had happened, how it had happened, and most significantly, how it had been allowed to happen without anyone in Camilla's circle seeing it coming. That last question had no comfortable answer, because the honest answer implicated not just Catherine's capability, but Camilla's own intelligence operation within the family. If Catherine had been able to prepare this quietly, brief the ceremonial staff without detection, and executed the change smoothly enough that the first Camilla knew about it was when the proceedings began, then something had gone wrong in the information network Camilla relied on. Something or someone. William's awareness of what was coming and his decision not to pass that information to Charles, who would almost certainly have raised it with Camilla, is a thread that requires its own examination. Whether Charles knew and chose silence, or whether William withheld the information entirely, the outcome was the same. Camilla walked into that ceremony without the intelligence she would have needed to counter what Catherine had prepared, and Catherine walked into it knowing exactly what she was about to do, and precisely what it would mean for the balance of power inside this family when it was done. The fallout from that imbalance did not take long to arrive. The fallout inside the palace. The car ride back told everything. Not Camilla's car, Charles's. The king sat in the back of that vehicle. He sat with the particular stillness of a man processing something he had not been prepared for. Those who observed him leaving the venue noted it. The usual post-ceremony energy was absent. The small talk with aides, the quiet debrief about how the occasion had gone. None of it happened the way it normally happens after a significant royal event. Charles was thinking. The problem facing the king in those hours was not simple. It never is, when the two most important women in his life find themselves on opposite sides of something. Charles has spent years carefully managing that particular tension, building a household where Camilla's position as queen is respected and protected, while simultaneously maintaining the relationship with William and Catherine that the future of the monarchy depends on. That balancing act just became considerably harder. The first call came from Camilla's private secretary to the king's office, within 2 hours of the ceremony concluding. The content of that communication has not been made public, but the timing alone communicated urgency. Something had been building toward this for a long time. 2 hours is not the gap of someone taking a measured breath before raising a concern. 2 hours is someone who has spent the car ride home deciding how to respond and arriving at a conclusion quickly. Camilla wanted acknowledgement. She didn't want a public statement, nor a formal reprimand directed at Catherine. Something more specific and more important than either of those things. She wanted Charles to confirm, privately and unambiguously, that what Catherine had done fell outside the boundaries of acceptable conduct, that the Queen's authority over ceremonial occasions was not something that could be quietly redirected by the Princess of Wales. Regardless of how skillfully the redirection had been executed, Charles's response took longer than Camilla expected. That delay was itself a message. In a household where communication between the king and his wife is typically immediate and direct, a delayed response to something this significant was not administrative. It was considered Charles was not rushing to Camilla's corner. He was thinking through the implications of what had happened and what his response would signal to both sides. He spoke to William first. That sequencing will not have escaped Camilla's notice when she eventually became aware of it. The king consulted his son before responding to his wife's concern. It placed William's perspective inside Charles's thinking before Camilla's position had been formally acknowledged. It was not a neutral act. The conversation between Charles and William was private. What filtered through to people close to both men suggested it was direct. William did not act surprised about what Catherine had done. He did not distance himself from her decision or offer careful diplomatic language, the kind that would have given Charles room to present the situation as a misunderstanding. William was clear. Catherine had acted within her understanding of her role. He supported that understanding. Charles listened. What he said to Camilla afterward represented the tightrope walk his entire reign has required him to perform. He acknowledged her frustration, validated her position as queen and the authority that comes with it. But he stopped short of condemning Catherine's actions directly, stopped short of the unambiguous backing Camilla had been looking for. That gap between acknowledgement and backing was devastating. Not dramatically, not in a way that produced tears, raised voices, or the kind of confrontation that leaks to palace correspondence within 48 hours. Camilla is far too composed and experienced for that, but the gap registered. It told her something about where Charles stood when the interests of his wife and the interests of his heir's family pulled in opposite directions. It told her that the future won. Camilla's public conduct in the days following the ceremony was flawless. Every appearance was managed with the professionalism that has become her trademark. Nothing in her manner suggested anything had occurred beyond the routine business of royal life. The performance was so complete that several royal correspondents who had picked up on the atmosphere at the ceremony began to question whether they had misread the situation. They had not misread anything. Behind that composed exterior, a recalibration was underway. Camilla's team began a quiet review of how Catherine had been able to execute the change without detection. Conversations happened. Processes were examined. The question of who inside the ceremonial structure had been accessible to Catherine without Camilla's household being aware received particular attention. The answers were not reassuring, because what those answers revealed was not a one-time lapse, not a gap in communication that could be closed with a procedural adjustment. What they revealed was that Catherine had built relationships and access. He built it within the institutional infrastructure that operated entirely independently of Camilla's sphere of influence. That independence was the real story, not the ceremony or the overrule. It was not even Charles's measured non-response to Camilla's concerns. The real story was that Catherine had constructed a position inside this institution strong enough to act without permission and secure enough to absorb whatever fallout followed. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone inside those palace walls felt it. What this moment reveals about the future. This was never just about one ceremony. The people who reduce it to that miss the larger story entirely. What happened that day was not a one-off. Not an impulsive act from a woman momentarily emboldened by circumstance. It was a data point, one in a sequence that, when viewed together, tells a very clear story about where this monarchy is heading and who is driving it there. Catherine is driving it, not loudly, or in a way that generates the kind of press that requires a palace response. In the quiet, methodical, entirely deliberate way that has defined her entire approach to this role from the beginning. The ceremony was simply the moment that approach became visible enough for the outside world to begin understanding what those inside the institution have known for some time. The transition is already underway. However, it's not a formal transition. Charles is king. That is not in question. But inside the daily operation of the monarchy, inside the decisions about how occasions are managed and what the institution prioritizes and whose vision shapes its public face, a shift has been happening, gradually. Then suddenly, the ceremony happened. Camilla's position going forward is the question nobody inside the palace is asking publicly, and everybody is asking privately. Her formal authority remains intact. She has the title and precedence, the constitutional reality of her position as queen. None of that changed in that ceremony room. But authority inside the royal family has never operated purely on formal grounds. It operates on relationships, on trust, on the unspoken acknowledgement of where real influence sits. That acknowledgement has moved. The public read the situation with the instinctive accuracy that large groups of people sometimes bring to moments of genuine significance. The reaction to what filtered out about the ceremony was not outrage at Catherine's conduct. It was something closer to recognition. A sense that the woman the country had watched faced illness and recovery, and years of relentless scrutiny had arrived somewhere. It had become something. The affection for Catherine that crystallized during her cancer recovery did not dissipate when she returned to public life. It deepened, settled into something more permanent than the admiration people feel for a public figure who handles difficulty well. It became identification, a collective sense that Catherine's story was connected to something people understood from their own lives. That connection is worth more to the monarchy than any ceremony. It is worth more than the careful positioning of any individual within any proceeding. It is the thing Diana had, and the institution spent years struggling to accommodate. The ability to make people feel that the monarchy was something more than a constitutional arrangement and a collection of historic buildings. Catherine has it. The implications for the long reign of William and Catherine, when it comes, are significant. The groundwork being laid now, quietly and without announcement, is the groundwork for a monarchy that looks different from its recent past, more focused and purposeful, less encumbered by the internal politics that have generated so many damaging headlines over the past decade. The ceremony was a signal. It was sent to the institution and to the people within it, people who needed to understand where authority was heading, sent, whether intentionally or not, to the public watching from outside. Diana spent her royal life fighting to have her instincts respected inside an institution that treated them as problems. Catherine does not appear to be fighting that battle, because Catherine appears to have already won it. Catherine did not raise her voice. She did not issue a statement. One quiet decision in a ceremony room, and the balance of power inside the British monarchy shifted in a way that cannot be undone. That is what authority looks like when it is real. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more.